I don't get nervous. Not since my first game of high school versus Gilman. I fumbled 2 snaps. Other than that, and I came back and threw like out and up down the sideline. Other than that, play ball.
Hello and welcome back to the Hard Knocks podcast. I am your host, Peter Schrager, and as we inch closer to real football, things are starting to crystallize in training camps across the league. The start of the regular season is now just a few weeks away, and in Chicago, Caleb Williams is looking like the real deal. Rome Odunze is making big catches, and Simone Biles is in desperate need of a new wardrobe. What? Okay, that was a very low blow, unnecessary comment from me, but I had to at least touch on this Biles wardrobe snafu. Let me explain. Biles, fresh off her historic run at the Paris Olympics, showed up to the Bears-Bengals game on Saturday to support her husband, Bears safety Jonathan Owens. She was rocking a walking boot, but was also sporting a custom jacket filled with awesome photos of her husband. But they were all pictures of Owens playing for the Packers, and there were Packers logos all over the jacket. So, of course, she got crushed online for it, and so did Jonathan Owens. I can't believe this is a thing, but in 2024, a wife of a Bears player wearing Packers logos is a thing. So as we've said on the show before, Bears fans are passionate, and let's just say they made their feelings known about the wardrobe faux pas. But here I am, a man of reason, urging Bears fans to take a deep breath and urging the Bears and someone at Halas Hall to hook Simone up with some new gear, and maybe we could put this all behind us. But enough about wardrobe. Let's get to the actual Hard Knocks episode this week, because I am fired up about our guest who is on this podcast. Someone who spent 7 seasons in Bears blue and orange is joining us today. A former first-round pick of the team and a guy who would have been an absolute Hard Knocks superstar had the cameras been tracking him in training camp so many years ago. I'm talking about the one and only Kyle Long. Kyle had a front row seat to the Bears' ups and downs over the last several years, so I'm excited to hear his take on this year's team. All right, let's get to the episode itself, because it was a good one. The Matthew Judon trade stuff was really interesting, and it brought me back to the Giants Hard Knocks season that we just had in the offseason, in that we had rare access to a general manager openly working on something that didn't necessarily work out. See, with the Giants, that situation was a trade with New England to move all the way up to number 3 overall so that they could potentially get a quarterback in the draft. We had multiple episodes of that Giants season where Joe Schoen is talking to Elliott Wolf at the Patriots. Can we get a trade? Can we not? It never happened. In the Bears Hard Knocks season, we see Ryan Poles working to see if they could land Patriots star pass rusher Matthew Judon in a trade. Let's take a listen to some of that conversation.
He's 50th among defensive ends. To put in perspective, Sweat's 14th. We believe he would help us get better, just his style.
The trade doesn't happen, but I love that the Bears and Hard Knocks give us access like this. I'll tell you, I was reporting on the trade as it was happening in real time, and I didn't know how close the Bears were to actually pulling it off. I knew the Patriots were shopping Judon and that there were conversations had, but to see that it got this close, this is access we didn't have previously. Now, here's what's interesting. Judon, it turns out, wasn't interested in signing a long-term deal with a new team, and that's what holds up the trade to the Bears. Let me put my insider hat on. Why is this significant? Because as we record this podcast, the New York Jets are currently in a conundrum with their recently acquired star pass rusher Haason Reddick, because Reddick wants to sign a long-term deal, and it seems the Jets aren't looking to pay him the numbers that Reddick wants. So in Judon's case, he would have been willing to come to the Bears, maybe, but the Bears wanted to sign him to a long-term deal. They didn't want him to hit free agency next year. They were looking for more than a one-year rental. At least they were looking for that for a third-round pick, which ended up being the compensation. Atlanta, it turns out, was willing to trade a third-round pick and pay Judon what he's being paid anyway and give the opportunity for them to either re-sign him during the season or to let him hit free agency when the season is over. Interesting that Reddick, who's holding up the Jets' plans in a way, well, he wants the big money and wants to be a Jet, but they have to pay him that number. In Judon's case, wasn't the situation. He's like, I want to go somewhere, but I also want to be able to sniff free agency at the end of this thing. Then we get this cool flashback to the trade for Austin Booker, and it's a great little moment too. Booker, as you saw at the end of episode 2 when he was dominating in the preseason game against the Bills, is a potential star in the making and someone the Bears are very excited about. Ryan Poles in the front office were high on him in the draft last year and traded to get him.
Is there anybody at the top of the Oranges that you fight to get back in on?
Booker will start working on the calls. 123 and down for next year's 4th to try to get Booker.
And clearly their intuition is proving to be solid, as it looks like Booker's been a stud throughout camp.
I'm a sleeper. Not many people know about me. I'm going to continue to get better in the shadows, and they're not going to know what's coming.
The Tory Taylor Soldier Field moment is worth putting into a bit of context, too. Taylor is the team's Australian 4th-round pick who will be the punter this year. And to think, even after a decorated career at Iowa, which is in the Big Ten and in the Midwest and is a college football powerhouse, to think that Taylor, who grew up in a nation known for cricket and Australian rules football and rugby, union or league, depending on your preference, is suiting up for the Chicago Bears of the National Football League in America. Well, it's just wild. And what a testament to the NFL and its efforts to be an international brand. And of all the places for Taylor, who's coming from Australia to play, to come to Soldier Field, this is the NFL's oldest field. It has the smallest stadium capacity size and maybe the most history in the entire league. Here's Tory Taylor, a 4th-round rookie, soaking it all in.
I thought you said no more, no punts. We had 3 in the first quarter, man.
Tell me about it. It's just preseason.
Oh, no.
Hey, we wanted to get you a couple.
Yeah, thank you.
We want you to work, in the stadium.
Yeah.
So much of the start of the episode is focused on defensive stars, but we also get a lot of 3 of the 4 quarterbacks that we have been tracking this season on Hard Knocks. Let's start with Tyson Bagent, who took the football world by storm last year when he was inserted into the starting lineup as an undrafted player out of Shepherd University, a Division II school, and then went on to show some flair, some personality, and some real skills in the process.
Really looking forward to taking advantage of these last weeks of the preseason and just kind of keeping it fresh on everybody's mind that I'm not just some chump in the QB room. And I can also play at a high level.
Bagent started a game on Sunday Night Football last year on NBC in front of a national TV viewing audience. And he did so in LA against the Chargers, just a few miles from Hollywood. His story and his family, well, they may be worthy of a Hollywood script. Tyson is a physical specimen in his own right, and he often puts videos on Instagram. Will show his workout routine from the off season, and it's old school, and it's in the backyard, and it's really cool to see. His father, well, his father is simply the man as well. You see, Travis Bagent, his dad, is a 28-time world arm wrestling champion. I first heard of the Bagents, Tyson and his dad Travis, 2 years ago at the end of the college football season when Tyson got invited to the Senior Bowl. Senior Bowl only invites 6, 7, 8 quarterbacks every year, and one of them was this Division II kid. I said, who is this guy? Well, Travis, his father, did an interview with the NFL Network at the game, and he was willing to arm wrestle my colleague, Tom Pelissero, live on air. Now, if you're not familiar with Tom, he's a fine reporter, and I think he'd be okay with me saying this. He is not a world champion arm wrestler. And the way Travis played to the cameras during this arm wrestling match was just so great. He toyed with Tom for a little bit. He's looking at this guy across from him saying, okay, let's pretend. And then he just slammed his wrist down. It was great TV. It was great flair. And I'm like, I got to meet this guy.
Relax there, young man. I thought for sure you'd be a lot stronger. I'll take it from here. Listen, the rest of these people, they've been calling me Travis. You can call me Daddy, young man. Yes, sir.
So at the combine a month later, I did meet Travis Bagent, and he was everything you could hope he would be. He was awesome with a ton of personality. So when Tyson finally got in to the Bears starting lineup last year, I immediately said, okay, I'm going to have Travis on my podcast. We're going to bring him on Good Morning Football on the NFL Network. We're going to go big, and we're going to highlight Travis, his father, the arm wrestling champion. Surely he'd want to yuck it up and do all the things he did in the pre-draft process. But he declined. And the Bears said that Travis didn't want to take away from his son's moment or become the story. My respect for Tyson and his father skyrocketed right there. All the arm wrestling stuff is great and it's fun and it makes for awesome TV. But when it comes to his son and his life, making that Bears roster and making the most of an NFL opportunity is what's most important for Tyson Bagent. So Jen and Tom Reed, Austin Reed's parents, were my MVPs on this podcast last week, but you've got to excuse me if I want to throw some flowers at the feet of Travis Bagent here too. Yes, Travis Bagent, aka the Beast. We go from Tyson Bagent to Caleb Williams, and he's wired for sound in the first half of the preseason game against the Bengals, and it's just excellent to hear him talk during the game.
Let's go. Let's settle in. Let's march this down the field. Let's go get it. Let's go get it. Ready, set.
And then we get another quarterback, Austin Reed, singing for the team at the end of the episode. And I must say, it's lovely. He's got a beautiful singing voice. Well done, Austin. We didn't get much Brett Ripien, who's the fourth quarterback in this mix during the training camp period. But I must say, I've enjoyed every little bit of him on this show, too. The Bears quarterback room is quickly becoming one of my favorite position groups in the league. And we have to thank Hard Knocks for giving us all this access and getting to know these quarterbacks who we otherwise would not know. Now, let's get to our guest. He was a first-round selection of the Chicago Bears a few years back, and now he is in the broadcasting world and is killing it. I am so happy to have on one of the most beloved guys online, but also by Bears fans for his time with the team, Mr. Kyle Long. Kyle, what's up, dude?
Peter, it's so good to see your face. I'm so used to being just a fan of yours and watching you on TV and laughing and splitting my sides with your witty nature. But to be here and hang out is great. It's a dream come true.
Bro, you're so kind. I appreciate it because I feel the same exact way about you. I always loved covering you as a player, and now you're making the transition full-time into the broadcast booth. You've been on the top show on CBS for the last several years, but tell us about your new podcast that you're launching this week for CBS.
Well, we're leaning into the digital side of things. As you know, the streaming is huge. It's been a great opportunity they've laid in front of me and my colleague, Mike Renner. We were talking about kids before the pod. This is our baby now. I get another baby, and we get to kind of raise this thing up as we'd like. Obviously, we're going to lean heavy into the review of the Sunday slate on Monday shows. We're going to get into the weeds there. Tuesdays and Wednesdays are going to be an award power rankings day. You know, that midweek talking points, as you and I know and love so well. And it'll be a lot of fun. I mean, it's just a couple guys shooting the you-know-what, and I know that's the goal for every podcast. But the great thing about me and Mike is we come from the same game in
very different angles.
Avenues.
Yeah.
This is a guy that I probably would have wanted to choke when I played because he probably graded me out a little bit lower than I thought I deserved and all that. He's got a PFF background, pro scouting, college scouting. Mike's great, and he knows all the coverages. He knows all the schemes. So for me, who's just an O-line centric, D-line centric kind of guy, it broadens my horizons, and you'll get to see that live on our show. So Pushing the Pile, it's a lot of fun, and come join us Monday through Thursday, 9:30 a.m.
I'm so happy for you. I remember when you were drafted and your story was like, all right, he was a baseball player. He's got some football experience, but he's Howie Long's kid and Chris Long's. And then you had this awesome NFL career, and it all started with the Chicago Bears. What do you remember about being drafted by the Chicago Bears and what that meant to you as not only a football player, but a member of one of the great football families in the NFL?
Yeah, I just remember sitting in our living room on draft night, not thinking I was going to be a first rounder. I didn't know if I was going to be a second rounder, but there was a run on guards. And when that phone rang and it was a Chicago area code and I picked up, it was Robin from the Chicago Bears. My brother and my dad were in the room with me, obviously my whole family, but the looks on their faces when they found out I was going to be a Chicago Bear, I could tell I was in for something special. And they used the word crown jewel franchise, and it held true through my career. And the people, the players I got to play with, and obviously the city is just unmatched.
now when you're watching Hard Knocks and you're seeing Caleb being integrated as a first round pick and the latest face of the franchise? Do you go back to your muscle memory of like, okay, first round pick, the Bears, here's what or does this feel completely different and it's almost like a completely entirely different team?
Well, I'll start with the first round pick conversation. And lucky for me, I was the 20th pick and I wasn't the first pick, and I didn't have every eye in the universe on me, but there were enough eyes in that building on me because I was the first round pick and I knew I was going to be judged early and often. And I still remember distinctly jumping false start 2 times in a row in Bourbonnais, and Charles Tillman standing over there guarding Brandon Marshall, and he looks across the line. He said, "You're holding up practice. Give them their money back."
Yes.
And I didn't want to be the guy who was known as an unaccountable person. So from Jump Street, whatever Roberto Garza, my 13-year veteran center, told me to do, I did it. And, if Matt Slauson, the left guard, said jump, I said, how high, dude? Yeah. And they gave me tremendous space to learn and improve every day. And it's all about luck of the draw. When you get drafted, whatever room you go into can either make or break you or play a big part in making or breaking you. And I was lucky enough to go in with some vets. Caleb getting to go into this situation offensively, but also people forget, and they've seen it on Hard Knocks, this defense carried the team into the end of the year like a tidal wave. It was a lot of fun to watch, and with the Montez Sweat ad, it's just been gangbusters on the defensive side of the ball. And I hope we keep the pub down on the defense because I want them sneaking up on these teams week in, week out, and giving our offense an opportunity to just take a breath as well.
Yeah, and that was a big piece of the last episode where it's Jalen Johnson and Keenan Allen, and it's like Jalen Johnson's getting the best of Keenan. They also added Kevin Byard. They added some guys in the draft. Like, we'll keep it down, but this does feel like offense, shiny object. Everyone talk about the offense, but what unit is going to take this team to the next level is actually going to be that defense. Can you speak on that, D, a little bit if you go through the levels and like what excites you?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that really excites me, obviously, at the end of the year, you watch the Montez Sweat. Every single down is a mismatch for this guy from a physical standpoint. There's nobody that matches up well with him. And then you add Austin Booker on the other side, and things are looking really tasty for this Chicago Bears front. And if you can corral these quarterbacks and keep them in, it's going to be a long day for quarterbacks and offensive lines. You're not going to be able to slide to one guy. And obviously, we saw the defense pressuring a lot in the last preseason game. That's a lot of fun to watch. I mean, hopefully you can continue to get home on these QBs, and that's what you got to be known for: sacks, turnovers, and cashing in on the tip balls and overthrows. And we're going to have to speed these offenses up if we want them to play that style of football defensively.
The Jets were on Hard Knocks last year, and everyone got so excited, and they also had the Hall of Fame game to get everyone pumped up, and Rodgers played in a preseason game against the Giants, and then we know what happened. And then there's this thing of like, oh, that's just the Jets franchise. Cursed, same old Jets. You've come across millions of Bears fans over the last decade and a half. Is that the feeling with these Bears fans as they're trying to get excited, but there's this feeling of hesitation? Or is it not like the Jets fans where they're so cursed and so demonized in like their own head that they're not going to let the negative thoughts seep in?
I think we all see the same therapist, but we have different issues. I think as for Jets fans, you kind of have to just believe it at this point. But for the Bears, we've seen how close we've been. Even my rookie year, I remember going, what was it, 8-8? We lost to Rodgers on the
Jordy
Randall
Nelson
Cobb
deep pass or Cobb. You're right.
I think it was Cobb. He rolled left. Julius Peppers got cut by Kuhn, and that was the end of our season. And I remember walking off the field thinking, we'll be back. We got a good team. We got a young team. I'm young. And then the tail end of my career with the Bears was the double doink. So it's, the bookending of those two and the mediocrity and less than mediocrity in the middle. But we were always so close. We always had really good units. The Jets had a good defense last year, and I've been on great defenses with the Bears, and I've been on great offenses with the Bears, but you got to couple it. It's got to have a union. And I feel like we're really close there in Chicago with getting those two units playing complementary football.
Yeah, and you mentioned that double doink game. Trubisky was the last quarterback to be drafted this high by the Bears, and there was so much excitement. And of course, the postscript is, you drafted Trubisky over Mahomes. Great. This Caleb thing, this feels like this is different than even Trubisky, and yet Jaden Daniels has had an amazing summer with the Washington Commanders also. Do you see them being compared to each other throughout the season, or is this just Caleb and the Bears, and let's worry about that? Don't worry about what's going on in Washington.
I think it's probably going to be Caleb versus the expectations of Caleb, as opposed to comparing the two quarterbacks, because albeit they're both explosive, dynamic playmakers and people love them for different reasons in college, this is our guy in Chicago, and we don't want to have to pit two guys against one another. Caleb, what do they say, jumped the shark a little bit, and he's been talking about some top quarterbacks this offseason, and I remember there was a few people that were left off that list. And I also heard that Tom Brady is kind of taking him under his wing, and I think you'd be crazy to think that Tom Brady hasn't planted some villain seeds in this young quarterback's mind. And if this stuff isn't intentional, Caleb's obviously a really smart guy. Maybe he's starting off some rivalry earlier than later in Chicago with some of these quarterbacks around the league. I'm not naming names, Pete.
No. I heard him say it. His two quarterbacks he watches are Rodgers and Stafford. Meanwhile, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, not mentioned. And I think everyone raised their eyes and said, okay, no place for Mahomes in this conversation, but that was Caleb.
Now, I think there's something to be said there. So I remember I was talking with somebody at the Oregonian when Penei Sewell was coming out for the draft, and, they were like, what can you learn from him? And I was like, absolutely nothing, because he's such a freak and he does things that you just can't do if you're a human being. And I feel like if I'm a young quarterback, I'm not going to watch Mahomes. I'm going to watch the guys who can do this thing by the book. Patrick's like a Picasso out there, and if you're trying to replicate that, you might wind up dropping out of your liberal arts school very quickly. I would say paint by the numbers for a lot of these guys. Figure out how to paint by the numbers, and when it comes time to get sexy with your brushstrokes, do it. And I feel like Caleb has found a good group of guys that he can kind of emulate. And you've seen some of the eye stuff, the throwing away from the eyes like Stafford does. You've seen him going crossbody going left, which is an Aaron staple. When I see him start floating to the right outside the right tackle and dropping back, that's what I'm going to say. I know he's watching 15.
That's it. And you could say you don't emulate his game, but no one else tries that stuff. If you're going for it, that's Mahomes' influence. You never had the Hard Knocks crew follow you around. Would you have been leaning into that, or you've been shying away? I know offensive linemen, typically I go back to like the Denver Broncos and the Stink Schlereth days, like you guys don't want to be on camera, like that's not about us, but I feel like you were always a personality as a player. What do you think you would have done?
That's funny. Schlereth's on camera a lot for a guy who doesn't want to be on camera. Bear, shut up for a second. I love you. I'm gonna pet the hell out of you in a second, but we're talking Bears.
Is that your dog? Is that your dog?
My dog's name is Bear. Bear, come here. I want to show you to the boys. Come here. Come here. This is Bear. He's my 6-year-old long-haired German Shepherd, and he's the best babysitter, big brother for my daughters, and friend for my wife when I'm working way too much during the season.
You see, Bear would have been a great character to profile on Hard Knocks. Like, Bear would have been perfect.
Bear would have been great. And so I named him Bear because Mark Sanchez lived with me one year, and he had a black lab named Oso, and Oso is bear in Spanish, and it was like he was the coolest dog. But as far as the Hard Knock stuff goes, I would have 100% leaned into it. Now, I wouldn't have been outwardly excited amongst my teammates when it's like, oh, they're going to have cameras in here. I would play along. I'd probably be the mole. And I would definitely have a lot of fun. A few of my teammates were like, dude, you missed the boat on this Hard Knocks thing. You would have been having way too much fun. And I would have. I love football. I love the guys. And I love that people get an opportunity to see what tremendous men there are in the National Football League. And there's a reason that we all fawn over these characters. They're not just athletes, they're human beings. And that's the great thing, I think, that Hard Knocks does. It really humanizes us in a positive way.
I love that. The Bears, we think of this old school franchise buttoned up, like Martellus Bennett was a Bear, Brandon Marshall was a Bear, Jay Cutler.
Bro, my huddle, my rookie year, I'd break the huddle with Jermon Bushrod, Super Bowl champ, left tackle, Matt Slauson, Hard Knocks from the Jets, throwback. Shout out to Matt Slauson, center Roberto Garza from Brownsville, Texas, who brought the entire state of Texas with him anytime we played a football game. Me at right guard, Jordan Mills right tackle. But then this is where you just hold your breath here. This is Alshon Jeffrey, Brandon Marshall, Martellus Bennett, Matt Forte, Jay Cutler.
Yeah.
It's like an NBA Jam skill group.
Awesome players and huge personalities, each one of them in their own right.
Oh, yes. I still remember Brandon Marshall coming to the huddle and demanding a couple footballs during a period, and Jay Cutler saying, dude, this is 9-on-7. Brandon just not taking no for an answer. He wants the ball thrown to him at all times. So like Jay dealing with all these personalities is great. And I wish I could be back in those shoes. I wish I was young again doing that kind of stuff.
I know. So cool. Your father played on some interesting Raiders teams too. How do you think Hard Knocks would have done with the early 80s Raiders?
Amy Trask would have been involved in a lot of legal conversations, I'm sure, being that she was the resident exec/lawyer for the team. Those guys had a lot of fun. And as you know, LA in the heyday was a lot of fun. I just, I can only imagine what the defensive player of the year was doing in the mid 80s in Los Angeles.
We're going to wrap with this because I love it. As we spin this season forward, we're getting to know these guys, and we always have this Hard Knocks feeling of like, all right, this is the team. We watched, we got to know them. What's the biggest challenge to the Chicago Bears from going from one of the bottom teams the last few seasons in the NFL to actually making it to the playoffs?
I was explaining this to my wife the other day when I watched the Bears offense, the ones, go 3 and out 3 times in a row. I'm still workshopping it, Peter, but I think it's this. You need to have stamina as it pertains to success. What we saw was a team that went out and looked pretty darn good in their first action after the Hall of Fame game in live reps in the week against the Bengals. So you're going all week against the Bengals. You do well. Every clip is on social media. We've all seen Hard Knocks all fall. Some guys think the hay's in the barn. Some guys are resting on their laurels, but I'm sure of the fact that Caleb Williams is not. And he's trying to keep everybody on the same page. Takes a little bit to build up that stamina to say, we're going to be okay after 3 and outs. We just have to stick to our plan, stick to our guns. And as you saw it against the Bengals, things started to happen. The snowball effect takes place in a good way, but I think they have to learn how to do it. And I didn't realize that till I got to Kansas City. And I saw that even Patrick Mahomes goes 3 and out sometimes. Even the Kansas City Chiefs in all their glory go 3 and out, but they find a way to stick to it. And by the end of the game, they swing their axe again and that tree starts to creak and then it falls.
I love this. Thank you for joining the Hard Knocks pod.
Thanks, Peter.
Pushing the pile, Kyle Long and Mike Renner over there with Paramount and CBS. Dude, I'm so excited listening.
Thanks, Peter. See you guys.
Awesome. I love talking to Kyle Long. When he actually puts it into place, all the different personalities that he played with. You're talking about Jay Cutler, Martellus Bennett, Brandon Marshall, Matt Forte, then that entire offensive line that he played with. It's pretty great to hear, but he does have really good perspective on being a Chicago Bears rookie. And he says he took it like, hey, look, Charles Tillman is yelling at me. Brandon Marshall's yelling at me. The offensive line, like Slauson's telling me to jump. I say, how high? I so respect that. And I think Caleb Williams is doing the same thing here. Look, if I'm being honest, Caleb Williams doesn't have to sit and take orders from any of these other veteran players. And he certainly doesn't have to look at Tyson Bagent and Austin Reed and Brett Ripien as equals because he's the guy, he's the future. And yet in every instance on this program that we've had access to seeing his interactions with his teammates, looks like Caleb's just one of the dudes. And I think that's the way to go about it when you're the first overall pick. Kyle Long's great. I'm excited to listen to his podcast, and I'm excited to check in with him throughout the season on this 2024 Chicago Bears team. Our MVP of the week is Bears general manager Ryan Poles. He's been in the background the first few episodes, and we got to speak with him on the podcast last week, but we actually get to see him in action in this episode, and I must say, it's pretty darn awesome. That Matthew Judon trade stuff, we don't see that everywhere, and to get that access was really, really rare. The Austin Booker trade, that flashback to all of that, really cool. And these are just the highlights that we're getting on Hard Knocks, because if you look at the last 18 to 24 months, the trade for DJ Moore, the selection of Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze in the top 10, the midseason trade for Montez Sweat a year ago, and the building of a roster that our guest Kyle Long agreed with is pretty darn good on paper. Poles may not be a household name, but as we get to know him, and as we got to know him last week on this podcast, I got to say, he's quickly becoming one of the more respected in his field as a general manager, and he's the MVP of the episode this week. And that's it for this episode of the Hard Knocks podcast. I know preseason games don't necessarily mean so much when it comes to regular season results, but it will be very fun to see the 3-0 preseason Bears take on the currently preseason winless Kansas City Chiefs in an actual game. This is the week of the preseason where we tend to see more from the starters, so going up against the ones from the back-to-back champs will give Poles and Coach Eberflus a chance to see what kind of team they have taking it into their week one battle. Check out the Hard Knocks Instagram page at Hard Knocks HBO for exclusive behind-the-scenes clips of this show. And if that's not enough for you, head on over to NFL.com for more Hard Knocks content. As always, feel free to let us know what you're thinking and feeling about the show. And if you'd like to share any thoughts, frustrations, questions, or have any suggestions of any guests you'd like to hear over the next 2 weeks, give me a shout on X at pschrags. That's PSCHRAGS. Or find me on Instagram at pschrager. That's PSCHRAGER. We'll be back next week for our second to last episode of Hard Knocks, which airs next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern on HBO and streaming on Max. Hard Knocks Podcast is a production of HBO and NFL Films in partnership with Pod People. It is hosted by me, Peter Schrager, and produced by Buffy Gorilla, Tony Mantilla, Brian Rivers, Sam Gubauer, and Carter Wogan. Special thanks to Michael Gluckstad and Savon Slater from the HBO podcast team, and of course, Ken Rogers at NFL Films. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Hey, let's get after it, man. Let's stay up, let's be safe, but let's get after it, all right?